Alright guys, TechGrubber here today, and it is Wednesday. Normally I'd do a recap today of the Pro League, but I can't do it because I'm out the entire day. So instead, we're going to talk about franchising. This is everything you need to know. I've been talking about this video for a while, but pretty much everything you need to know about what franchising could look like in Call of Duty next season. And of course, there's so much information here, I won't be able to go over all of it, but all the things you do need to know and all the main points of consideration, I will bring up today. Some of them are pretty obviously on the good end, some of them are pretty obviously on the bad end as far as I see. And then, you know, there's a lot of subjective territory where you can make up your own mind. So we'll go through all the relevant stuff today. Like if you enjoy, subscribe if you're new as always. And firstly, what is franchising? So effectively, it is organizing the Call of Duty World League just like it's a regular North American sports league, like a basketball, like an American football. Now, you know, those of you from Europe, from the UK may not be too familiar with this system, but effectively you have an open system and a closed system. Now, an open system is something like the Premier League, where pretty much anyone could start a football club, and in a few years there's, you know, a chance you could be playing in the Premier League, because you have the promotion relegation, which really is the key issue here. Now, in the franchise league, you don't have promotion relegation. The organizations buy their spot in the league. So the main comparison I'm going to be making here is to the Overwatch League, which Activision, you know, Activision publishes Call of Duty. They also publish Overwatch, and the Overwatch League is very much a franchise league. Now, we also have it to some extent in League of Legends, but, you know, it's not quite the same. That's kind of a closed league, but it's not quite a franchise. The teams still have their own brand, and that is one of the issues where potentially with this franchising system, as we've seen in Overwatch, the organizations will have to create a new brand outside of Optic Gaming, but, you know, we'll go down into that in a little bit. One other feature of a franchise league is that it tends to be based around individual cities. So if you look at Overwatch, Optic Gaming, they don't have an Optic Gaming team in the Overwatch League. Their team is called the Houston Outlaws, and that's the brand for the Overwatch League, and they have, you know, they're based in Houston, I guess. And other teams have different bases in different cities around the world. Now, I'm not sure I like this, but we'll go through everything you need to know really about it in the next few minutes. So firstly, why is this rumored to come to Call of Duty? And the first thing that may have sparked your attention this year when we look at the Pro League handbook is that it says, okay, organizations are free to make unlimited roster changes during designated roster change periods, which really implies that, okay, we don't have a franchising system this year, but the fact that they're giving organizations so much power implies that it's kind of preparing and trying to entice teams that want to come into the franchise league next season to go ahead and do it right now, because we're basically giving you the same powers you're going to get next season. And that is one of the disadvantages, at least of on the players' side, is that you get this situation where the organizations, because they've bought their spot, they basically own everything to do with the spot, and the players are just kind of puppets for the teams. And, you know, it can create definite issues when there's not like a players' union or something like you would have in a proper established North American normal sports league that we don't yet have in Call of Duty. So that does present some issues, but it was really rumored in Call of Duty. We had this article right here on ESPN saying that, okay, Activision Blizzard is evaluating its options to move to a franchise model for its Call of Duty World League following successful sales in its Overwatch League, according to its 2017 public annual report released in April 2018, this is. So this was the actual clause. Our expertise launching and growing the Overwatch League will allow us to launch additional professional esports initiatives. Later this year, we intend to expand the number of Overwatch teams, which I believe they did from 12 up to 20, and launch team sales for the Call of Duty Professional League. So this was earlier in 2018, but it seems like, you know, that's been brought back to 2019. Over time, we believe our esports initiatives could rival traditional sports for audience interest, advertisers, sponsors, ticket sales, and merchandise sales, both virtual and physical. So that was the clause. And one of the key elements of this, which I'm sure will pose a lot of worries to fans of, well, a lot of teams right now, Activision Blizzard is contractually obligated to approach those owners first, which is the owners of the Overwatch League teams, when it begins exploring franchise opportunity, according to sources. Each of the founding Overwatch League franchises agreed to pay Activision Blizzard $20 million for their slots over a multi-year period. According to team sources, those agreements were just as much about participating in the Overwatch League itself as they were about building a strong relationship with Activision Blizzard for future titles. So effectively, Activision Blizzard, supposedly, is going to go to the owners of the Overwatch League teams, and they are going to be the first teams to get offered the opportunity to come into Call of Duty. And definitely, I would suggest that a lot of them are going to be inclined to do so, because if you're a Cloud9 or something like that, and you have London, London Spitfire is your team in the Overwatch League, you don't really want to let another Call of Duty team or another owner get control of London for the Call of Duty season. If it does work out like that way, we still have city-based teams, which is very likely, I would suggest, considering that Activision run the Overwatch League. So if that's a possibility, are Cloud9 really going to sit back and let another organisation take over their spot in London? Or are they going to say, okay, well, we have a lot of incentives to buy in, so we basically control that entire section for the Activision stuff. Regionality is a very interesting discussion, and we will talk about it in a couple of minutes' time here, but there's definitely the opportunity that something like a FaZe Clan that's not in the Overwatch League, there's 20 teams right now in the Overwatch League. Only, I think, Splice, Optic, and Envy, we'll have a look at the other teams in a second, are currently operating in Call of Duty, and, well, definitely some legacy names in Call of Duty may be lost as a result of this, and FaZe isn't even in the Pro League this year, and, well, who knows. So before we move on, just for confirmation basically that this is going to happen, this is a clip from Kozdev, the owner of TK.
I was sad y'all didn't have a COD team, but I've been rooting for y'all in Black Ops 3. Yeah, it broke our hearts not to do it, but to be honest, what it was is we are negotiating to be able to buy a franchise license. Everyone, I mean, it's kind of a rumor, but I'll tell you, COD's franchising next year. So if we couldn't get a franchise, it made it kind of hard to want to invest in it this year. So a lot of us just waiting.
So as you can see, it's pretty much confirmed that this is going to happen in the upcoming season. And these are the teams currently in the Overwatch League. So you see, Florida Mayhem owned by Misfits, Optic Gaming have the Outlaws, Cloud9 have London Spitfire, and then you have Splice, who kind of own Toronto Defiant, Envy own Dallas Fuel, of course. You've got Immortals, NRG, Gen.G, of course, who have come into Call of Duty with Spacely's team. They own the Seoul Dynasty. And then a lot of the other ones are like venture capital schemes and other teams that have been in other esports, like, Immortals, NRG. I'm sure some of you guys have heard of these teams. And this team is owned by Huya, a Chinese streaming service. It's a little bit of an odd situation, and these guys supposedly are going to be the ones that are going to be first offered the spot in the Call of Duty World League, and, well, maybe they'll do some sort of partnership with teams currently in the league, but 100 Thieves, of course, don't have a spot in the Overwatch League, so, what's exactly going to be the situation here with 100 Thieves maybe trying to buy a franchise spot for next season, but what if, if there's 16 teams in the league, what if 16 of these Overwatch teams, and of course we've already got 3 in Optic, Splice, and Envy, but, 100 Thieves, what if these guys decide, okay, we're all going to buy our spots, and then, well, I don't know. Where does it leave it? It's an interesting question. So let's have a look through a lot of positives and negatives of this situation. I'm going to look at it from the fans' perspective and also from the players' perspective. So starting with the fans, regionalization is the big issue here. So basically what it means is each team will be based in like a city, and it's likely that they'll have another brand going along with it. And I'm sure a lot of you guys, and I really don't see a reason, I don't see why it should be a positive by any means, that Optic Gaming have to create another brand in addition to the Houston Outlaws to compete in Call of Duty. Maybe also based in Houston. I don't know exactly what's going to happen, but the fact that that could be a possibility, I think, is not a good idea. And okay, the idea of a regionality, it kind of harkens back to normal sports where you have, your mates, you go down the pub to watch the game, and, it's kind of a cool idea that that's a possibility, but as Richard Lewis was saying on the Eavesdrop podcast, esports should be bigger than that. I don't realize why the suits at the very top are really trying to push towards the idea that esports can just be run like a normal sport. And I think esports has much more potential than that. Maybe I'm naive. The idea that everything is city locked, I don't think is a fantastic idea by any means. Of course, it does have that opportunity to create like local fan bases, but it definitely excludes people globally. Like London Spitfire, let's say we have Cloud9 also get the London City team for the Call of Duty World League, for example, and they name it like London Hurricanes or something like that. But anyway, Cloud9 are an American organization. They may have American players, or they could have players from anywhere in the world. This London Spitfire team, Cloud9, an American org, South Korean players based in London. So if I'm from the UK, why would I support London Spitfire? There's no reason other than the fact they're based in London. I have no ties to them. And there's a very interesting story that came out a few months ago to do with the Seoul Dynasty owned by Gen.G and at London Spitfire, the Cloud9 team. This is the story right here. London Spitfire, the South Korean players, obviously have South Korean fans back in South Korea. They wanted to go and do a meetup and a fan signing in Seoul, but the Seoul Dynasty supposedly didn't approve the event, considering that sole region is like their jurisdiction and therefore it's like their fans or whatever, and therefore they didn't allow, supposedly, the London Spitfire team to do a meetup right there, and these are the tweets that are relevant to that. So it's a very interesting situation indeed, and I really don't see too many upsides of regionalization. It just creates like territorial situations. You know, what if Optic, for example, are based in New York? What if FaZe are based in Los Angeles? They obviously have fans in each other's sections, but you know, it kind of creates like a territorial situation where if I'm a New York FaZe fan, I kind of feel like, well, I'm in the Optic vicinity, you know? I don't really see too many upsides of it. Leave your thoughts in the comment section below, as always, as I'm sure you will. Now, the next thing to consider is the fact that the league takes a much bigger precedence in these franchise systems. If you're trying to make it more like a real sport, the league dominates, and the reason why this is the case is because if you're a traditional sports team, you want to have as many home games as possible so that you can sell the tickets and that you can sell merch at your stadiums. Now, that's the traditional way that the league structure has been so profitable for organizations the world over. And, well, eSports, I think, is different because you reach a lot of your audience and you get a lot of merch sales, not by getting people to come to your home stadium and watch a game, but you get it through the global media presence that you are able to achieve in eSports, having fans from all around the world, which is very difficult to achieve in a traditional sports setting. So the fact that you're kind of regressing eSports and fitting it into a straitjacket, I'm not sure I like by any means. And also, of course, following on from that, we have that, as I say, the league will likely take a much bigger precedence, which likely means that open events will either disappear entirely or they will be completely nulled down. We're seeing this year that open events still exist, but you can only win the event if you're in the league. So that system will likely continue or, you know, be even more drastic going forwards. Personally, I think events are much more exciting than the league. The problem with the league structure is that a lot of the matches end up being pointless. Now, MLG have tried this season to give bonuses for teams every time they win a match, so every match has something on the line and the teams near the bottom of the league can still make playoffs. So there's definitely some benefits there, but there's still going to come a point where the league is not interesting to watch because the matches effectively don't mean much at all, and that's always what you see in a league situation, whereas in a tournament environment, every match has something pretty important on the line for the most part. And, well, I generally think that Call of Duty fans much more enjoy watching the actual events than, you know, the league. And I hope that there's a lot of events to go alongside with the league, because I'm sure the league will take a much bigger precedence in a franchise system. Maybe there's going to be multiple stages as we see in Overwatch, but, you know, each stage in Overwatch, there's like 4 stages. Credit to Miner for this. I'll leave his Twitter link in that down in the description box below. He gave me a lot of information on this franchising stuff, but Overwatch has like 4 stages. They each have a playoff, and then you have like the World Finals. You also have like a World Cup, so you have other events, but it's very unlikely you're going to have a CSGO style situation where a lot of different tournament organizers can just run their own tournaments left, right, and center, and you know, Activision aren't going to do anything about it. Pretty much Activision are very likely to be controlling the entire space in terms of what events are allowed and what events are not allowed. And I would say that open events and events in general are going to take a back seat in precedence of the league if they're moving towards that more sports style system, which I don't think is necessarily good for fans. I'm sure a lot of you guys may enjoy watching the league, but I think on the whole, people find events more entertaining. And, well, that's certainly a worry of mine. Franchising also leads to less opportunities for Cinderella Story, something like an eUnited coming out of nowhere as an organisation and as players to coming to win an event. That's not going to be a possibility anymore. A team like Midnight, you know, it's very unlikely that's going to happen, apart from the fact that they can make their way up through the amateur side of things and, well, get picked up by a team that's actually bought the rights to the league. Because if you buy the rights, you guarantee that spot for lifetime, effectively. So a new organisation like an eUnited, a new organisation like a Midnight, they can't rely on their team doing stupid well and getting a load of sponsorships to maintain their spot in the league. If you don't have the money when you're asked to buy in, you're not going to have that spot in the league, which is, well, potentially a loss for fans. Now, of course, there are some positives to be considered here. A lot of them, I think, are on the players' side. Now, you could say there's a lot of advantages for fans as well, in that the game is going to be a hell of a lot more competitive focused, I would suggest, because Activision need this to work in the competitive scene. If you're going to get people paying millions of dollars to invest into your league, you cannot sit back and take a super lax approach in what goes on with competitive. You have to be right up there with the developers, making sure they're making good decisions that the pros like and also might help the fans. So very likely we're going to have a much higher propensity to get stickers in the game, to get team camos, to get a good league play system working early on, these sort of things. And I honestly think it may put off investors that Activision and Treyarch have been so misaligned their objectives really right now with putting competitive play in the game in even something as simple as league play. So we have another few positives to talk about as well. Cross fans is a possibility. An organization from Overwatch coming into Call of Duty, they follow the brand. A lot of more fans potentially will get the exposure here, and Call of Duty will actually possibly be seen, rather than like the second-rate cousin of esports, it may well be seen as like a proper big dog now, which is, well, maybe a blessing and a curse. One major advantage, I think, is the stability this will create for players and also the organizations themselves, because firstly, this recent situation we've seen with Red Reserve, these dodgy organizations that just go under and leave the players without any job security at all, that sort of thing should be covered for in an Overwatch League system when you've got big organizations that are guaranteed to, they're vetted, they're checked by Activision when they make their bids to get into the league. And, well, you shouldn't have any of those situations. Security should go up, and for the organizations as well, because they know they're not going to get relegated, they can invest a hell of a lot more in infrastructure going forwards, because they know that even 3 years down the line, they're going to still have a spot in the league. They don't have to worry about relegation. You do have the negative side of that, where if you're guaranteed a spot in the league, there's the potential that you're just going to bounce along the bottom of the barrel, and maybe you even have a legacy player that, can get you a lot of fandom, get a lot of sponsorship money, and you decide to keep them instead of getting your team to be better because you can get extra sponsorship money off that, and there's not necessarily the incentives to be super good when you don't have to worry about relegation, which is maybe a worry, but if the incentive structures are correctly in place, then that could be eliminated. As I say, Activision will likely have a much heavier hand in ensuring or trying to ensure the competitive success of the game, which is probably the biggest deal I think here. Activision really need this to succeed, because if it doesn't, these guys are not going to trust Activision particularly going forward into their future ventures, and well, they've gone into Overwatch. If Call of Duty fails for them, that's a big issue, and obviously it's a big issue for us as fans as well. But hopefully the game will be in a much better competitive state as a result of this, at least one can hope. Now, in terms of disadvantages for the players, there's a few things to consider. Overwatch League is really tightly regulated in terms of what the players are allowed to say and do on Twitter and outside of the league. Now, we know what Call of Duty players are like on Twitter, and it honestly creates a lot of entertainment. It doesn't run the game, but it's definitely another unique selling point, I guess, of Call of Duty is, the fun and the back and forth that pros have on Twitter and how accessible their, personal lives, I guess, are to fans. And, well, I highly doubt that pros will still be allowed to tweet the sort of stuff they tweet after this league goes live. Because yes, you can still control a league very tightly, even if it's not a franchise one. But if we see with what Activision have done, Activision Blizzard have done with the Overwatch League, then you have this situation where pros really cannot say what they want to say. And, well, it's definitely a negative in terms of freedom of expression, I guess, but maybe it's better for professionality, one could suggest. You also have the potential, like wage caps, restrictions on streaming, restrictions on sponsorships that Activision Blizzard may well put in place going forwards. Now, for the pro teams, there's likely a lot more money sloshing around here, probably bigger prize pools, all that stuff. How much that affects fans is difficult to say, but for the best of the best pros, these guys are going to be millionaires before not long if this franchising does come into effect. We have to be really careful, though, that there's still incentives for amateur players, because right now, even if there is enough money to incentivize amateur players to try and become pros, and you also do have this situation where there's probably like a substitute bench of players that amateur players have a chance to play with, their best players on the best teams in the league. But also you have this situation where there's going to be heavy stat padding, I would suggest. The amateur teams and the amateur players that are trying to get onto the organisation, they have no chance to win the tournament as a team or to win the league as a team because they're not in the best league. So why would they even try and win as a team? Let's try and win for myself. And I think that's a big issue going forwards, that players will just be stat padding super hard to try and get on a top team, and, well, it's not good for competitive integrity. One issue I also find with that is, for the fans' perspective, if you're a Dens, if you're a Shocks, well, of course, Dens has already gone to Reciprocity, Shocks has already gone to Red Reserve as their substitute, but as I say, if you're going to fill up a substitute bench of the best players globally, you're going to pick all the best talent out of Europe, all the best talent out of Australia, and those regions are no longer going to have, like, their prized team, as it were. And one also thing I wanted to mention briefly about regionality is that, okay, you can have a team from London, you can have a team from Seoul, you can have a team from Auckland, I don't know. But are you actually going to play your home games there? It's just not going to happen, is it? You don't actually have Overwatch. They're trying to do it a little bit where they have the games played in different regions and different stadiums. But it doesn't matter if you're from Seoul. You're still playing your games out in the States, regardless of where it might be. And I really don't think it's an achievable thing towards the future to have teams flying all across the place as like the national team. And any national team that Australia used to have in Mindfreak, of course, will likely be plucked apart because all their best talent will go to sit on the bench of the best teams in the league. And okay, maybe Aussie fans will have someone to root for, but the likelihood is that you're really going to lose these national teams, and whether Heretics can buy themselves a league spot is also up for question. So leave any thoughts, any comments, any queries in the comment section below. Hope you guys enjoyed. It is a tough topic. If you want to read any more on this, I did actually write an article back in June, I think, so I'll leave this down in the description box below as well. I go through some of my ideas that I had at the time in this as well, and I think some of it is still relevant, so I'll leave that down in the description box below as always. Hope you guys got something from this. Like if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new as always. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.
And that's how we do it. Get ready for the next round.